The company trying to evict my mother had been built on land my father may have owned. I did not know that when I walked into Cole Meridian headquarters with rain inside my boots, $10 in my checking account, and an eviction notice folded beneath my coat like a threat I was afraid to read twice. All I knew was that my mother and I had 10 days to leave the apartment where she had lived for 27 years. 10 days to pack the blue dishes she had saved from her wedding. 10 days to empty the bedroom where my father's jackets still hung because neither of us had found the courage to move them. 10 days to explain to 46 other households why the building they called home had been reduced to a line on a development plan. Carter House. That was its name. Cole Meridian called it Parcel 18B, cleared for redevelopment. Cleared. As though we were dust on a table. I worked as a legal assistant at a tenant advocacy clinic in Brooklyn. I knew the difference between proper notice and paperwork designed to frighten people into surrendering their rights. The problem was that knowledge did not matter when no one with authority would answer a telephone. I had called Cole Meridian's legal office 12 times. I had sent 6 emails, submitted 2 formal appeals, and visited the local property office twice. My mother was still recovering from her first operation and was scheduled for a second procedure within 2 months. She could barely manage the stairs. The temporary apartment offered to us was on the 3rd floor of a building without an elevator. The rain had started before sunrise and followed me into Midtown, tapping against bus windows and running in silver lines down the surrounding towers. Cole Meridian rose above the block as though it had pushed every other building aside. 72 floors of black glass, steel, and polished confidence. I stood beneath the entrance awning for 3 breaths, gripping the envelope until the paper bent beneath my fingers. My coat was 6 years old. The hem was wet. My boots squeaked against the marble floor. Everyone around me looked expensive in a quiet way, the kind of expensive that did not require a visible label. Men in fitted suits moved through the lobby with telephones pressed to their ears. Women carrying structured leather bags passed security without slowing down. I caught my reflection beside the elevators and almost laughed. I looked like someone who had entered the wrong movie. Maybe I had. Legal department, I told the receptionist. She looked at my damp coat, then at the envelope in my hand. Do you have an appointment? No. Her smile remained polite, but something behind it closed. Legal does not accept walk-in meetings. They do not accept calls either. Her eyes moved toward security. Ma'am. Emma Carter, I said. Carter House. 47 households received eviction papers from this company. I need 5 minutes with someone who can explain why. The redevelopment division does not meet directly with tenants. That is convenient. I had not intended to say it aloud. Her smile vanished. A security officer stepped toward me, not aggressively, only with the calm efficiency of someone following a familiar routine. I could tell this happened often. People entered carrying fear. The building sent them away carrying silence. Please, I said, hating how small the words sounded in that enormous lobby. My mother is recovering from surgery. Half the residents are older adults. There are children in that building who have never lived anywhere else. The receptionist glanced at her screen. You may submit an appeal online. I did. Then you will receive a response. The hearing date is 3 weeks after the scheduled removal date. That made her pause. Only for a second. The elevator doors opened behind me, and a group moved forward, carrying me with them. Someone brushed my shoulder. Another person reached past me to hold the doors. I stepped inside before security could redirect me. The receptionist called my name. I pressed the button marked 41, the floor listed for legal affairs. Nothing happened. A man beside me scanned a silver access card, and the panel illuminated. The elevator rose. Too fast. My stomach dropped as the numbers climbed past 41. I need the legal department, I said. No one answered. The man with the access card continued reading his telephone. The others stared ahead with the calm indifference of people who had never needed to beg a stranger not to take their home. The elevator passed 60, then 70. It stopped at 72 with a quiet chime. The doors opened into silence. Not ordinary office silence. The kind of silence money purchased. Thick carpet, dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows showing Manhattan beneath a curtain of rain. Everyone stepped out, and I followed because the doors were already closing behind me. A woman wearing an earpiece noticed me. Excuse me. Who are you meeting? Legal. Legal is on 41. I know. She moved toward me. At the same moment, Two men opened a pair of tall glass doors at the end of the hallway. Applause escaped from the room. Brief. Controlled. Then came the sound of crystal glasses touching. Through the opening, I saw a presentation screen. A map of Brooklyn covered the wall. One block was outlined in gold. My block. Carter House stood in the center, rendered as a clean white structure with no laundry in the windows, no flower pots on the fire escapes, and no people. Across the image were 3 words. Phase 1. Cleared. Something inside me stopped trembling. I did not know whether it was anger or exhaustion. Perhaps they become the same thing after a person has been ignored long enough. I walked toward the doors. The woman with the earpiece caught up with me. Miss, you cannot enter. That is my home on the screen. This is a private board meeting. Then they can privately explain why my mother is being forced out. I moved through the doors before she could stop me. The room was longer than our entire apartment. A black table stretched beneath hanging lights, surrounded by men and women holding champagne. At the far end stood Adrian Cole. I recognized him from magazine covers and business reports, playing silently in waiting rooms. 35 years old. Chief Executive Officer. The youngest executive ever to lead Cole Meridian. The man newspapers described as disciplined, visionary, and untouchable. In person, he looked less like a celebrity and more like a locked door. Dark suit. White shirt. No tie. One hand rested beside a narrow folder as he watched me interrupt a celebration worth more than $1 billion. Every face turned toward me. The woman behind me apologized. Mr. Cole, security is handling this. Adrian did not look away. Who is she? No one answered. I did. Emma Carter. I live in the building you just erased. A gray-haired man near the screen frowned. This is inappropriate. So is removing 47 families before their appeals can be heard. The acquisition was lawful, he said. The residents received proper notice. I pulled the envelope from my coat. You mean this? My wet fingers slipped against the paper. I hated that they could see me shaking. I hated it enough to keep walking. Security entered behind me, but Adrian lifted 2 fingers. They stopped. That frightened me more than shouting would have. Power should not have been that quiet. I reached the table and placed the eviction notice before him. A drop of rain fell from my sleeve onto the polished surface. No one moved. You call it cleared, I said, looking at the image of my home behind him. Because you never learned our names. The room became still. The gray-haired man started to speak, but Adrian touched the notice. His eyes moved across the first page without interest. Then he turned it over. His expression changed. Not much. A pause. A tightening in his jaw. Every person in the room noticed. In the lower corner, beneath the property code, was a faded red seal I had assumed belonged to the city. Adrian stared at it, as though it belonged to a grave. He picked up the paper and looked at me for the first time, not as an interruption, but as the answer to a question I did not understand. Close the doors, he said. The glass doors shut behind me. The sound was quiet. Final. Adrian placed one finger against the red seal. Who gave you this? For 1 second, I forgot how to breathe. Adrian was not asking where I had found the eviction notice. He was asking about the seal. Everyone around the table seemed to understand the distinction before I did. The gray-haired man set down his champagne and approached. His expression tightened when he examined the paper. That mark should not be there, he said. Adrian did not look at him. Victor, sit down. The man stopped. He was Victor Hale, the chief financial officer whose name appeared beneath nearly every redevelopment announcement Cole Meridian released. 14 years earlier, he had been the director responsible for acquisitions and corporate records. I had seen his photograph while searching for someone who might return my calls. In those photographs, he always looked calm. Now he looked like a man who had heard a locked door open behind him. Who delivered this document? Adrian asked me. It was taped to our apartment door yesterday morning. I was at work. Did it arrive in an envelope? Yes. I removed the white envelope from my coat and placed it beside the notice. Adrian examined the postage and return address. Victor leaned forward. This is an administrative matter. We should continue the meeting and allow legal affairs to handle her complaint. Legal affairs already handled it, I said. They ignored me. Several directors looked away. Adrian did not. How many times did you contact this company? 12 calls. 6 emails. 2 online appeals. 2 visits to the property office. No one responded. I received an automated message explaining that my hearing would occur 3 weeks after the removal date. A woman near the center of the table closed her folder. She had silver blonde hair, a navy suit, and the precise attention of someone who listened for a living. That timeline violates our published tenant review policy, she said. Victor turned toward her. Rachel, this is not the place. Apparently the correct place was unavailable, she replied. Adrian lowered the paper. Everyone except Rachel, Victor, and Miss Carter leaves. No one argued. Chairs shifted. Glasses were collected. People passed me without meeting my eyes, as though looking directly at me might make them responsible for knowing I existed. Security remained until Adrian dismissed them. Within a minute, the room that had held nearly 20 people contained only 4. Adrian pointed toward a chair. Sit. I would rather stand. Victor gave a humorless laugh. You entered a private meeting without permission, and now you are refusing a chair? I did not come here for a chair. Adrian sat first. What do you want, Miss Carter? Stop the removals. For your apartment? For the entire building. Victor folded his arms. The project has already been approved. Contractors have been retained. You are asking us to reverse months of work because you are dissatisfied with the relocation terms. There are no meaningful relocation terms. Every lawful tenant received compensation. I opened my folder and removed copies of the notices. $400. Rachel reached for the top page. That is the total moving stipend. For $100 per household, I said. In Brooklyn, for families being told to leave in 10 days. Rachel read silently. Adrian looked at Victor. You told the board that the residents accepted negotiated relocation packages. Most accepted. No, I said. Most signed forms they were told merely confirmed receipt. The property manager did not explain that the same page waived their right to challenge the relocation schedule. Victor's face hardened. That is a serious accusation. It is also true. I placed 3 signed statements on the table. Mrs. Alvarez is 74 and speaks limited English. Mr. Boone has lived there since 1998. The Wilson family was told the heat would not be repaired because the building was scheduled to close. Would you like their telephone numbers, or do people become real only after they hire attorneys? Silence settled over the room. Adrian read each statement. Victor spoke about compliance reviews, third-party management companies, and administrative errors. Adrian allowed him to continue until the words emptied themselves. Then he looked at me. Your mother requires another operation? I stiffened. How do you know? You told the receptionist that she was recovering. I remembered the cameras and earpieces. Nothing in this building disappeared. She had her first operation 6 weeks ago. The second is scheduled within 2 months. She still cannot manage stairs without help. Adrian leaned back. I can arrange a furnished ground floor apartment near her doctor's. I can also cover the remaining medical costs. Victor's posture relaxed slightly. Rachel watched me instead. What happens to the other families? I asked. Their cases will be reviewed. By the same people who ignored them? My office will review them personally. That is not the same as an independent review. Adrian opened a drawer, removed a black pen, and placed it beside a blank sheet of company letterhead. Name a reasonable figure. For what? Your relocation. Your mother's care. The disruption. The word landed between us like something dirty. Disruption. I thought of my mother wrapping the blue dishes in newspaper because she did not know whether we would have a kitchen next month. I thought of Mr. Boone carrying groceries up 2 flights because the elevator had been shut off again. I thought of children doing homework beside space heaters while this room raised champagne beneath warm lights. You believe I came here to negotiate my price, I said. Victor answered before Adrian could. Everyone has a price. The practical question is whether you are intelligent enough to accept yours. Rachel turned sharply toward him. Adrian became completely still. The trembling in my hands stopped. I reached across the table, took the pen, and wrote one number on the blank page. 47. I slid the page toward Adrian. That is my price. 47 households remain until every appeal receives independent review. Essential repairs continue. No one is pressured to sign a waiver. No one disappears because your schedule says the building is empty. Adrian looked at the number. You understand that this project is worth more than $1 billion. I understand signatures. I turned the notice toward Rachel and pointed to the authorization line. The underlying property transfer was approved by Daniel Carter. My father's name looked strange beneath the bright lights. Too formal. Too alive. Rachel pulled the page closer. Adrian's attention dropped to the signature. Victor reached toward the document, but Rachel moved it beyond his hand. Daniel Carter died 14 years ago, she said. I know, I whispered. He was my father. Rain struck the windows harder. Rachel opened her laptop and searched the corporate filing system. This transfer was recorded 8 months ago. She enlarged the scanned record. The signature appears to have been copied from an original partnership document. Meaning? I asked. Rachel looked at Adrian. Someone used the signature of a deceased man to authorize the transfer. Adrian turned toward Victor. The silence between them felt colder than the rain. Then he looked at me. For the first time, the power in his face was not control. It was doubt. Miss Carter, he said, Cole Meridian may not have the legal authority to remove anyone from that property. The statement should have relieved me. Instead, the floor felt less certain beneath my feet. If Carter House did not belong entirely to Cole Meridian, someone had built a billion-dollar project on a concealed ownership claim. Adrian closed Rachel's laptop and gathered the documents. The redevelopment schedule is suspended pending review. Victor straightened. You cannot freeze a project of this size because one tenant presented a questionable paper. I can suspend any project carrying my name when evidence of fraud appears inside it. The board will demand an explanation. Tell them I found a problem. What kind of problem? Adrian held up the document bearing my father's signature. The kind that signs papers 14 years after burial. Victor's eyes moved toward me. Not surprise. Calculation. He was not trying to understand what had happened. He was measuring how much I knew. Adrian noticed. Rachel, secure every record connected to Carter House, Parcel 18B, Daniel Carter, and the original Meridian Square partnership. No files leave the system. No access permissions change. Rachel nodded. I will contact information security. Use personnel who do not report to Victor. Victor buttoned his jacket. You are allowing a stranger to turn you against your own officers. No, Adrian said. The forged signature accomplished that. Victor's expression remained controlled. Suspicion is expensive in this company. So is fraud. Victor left. The doors closed behind him. Rachel gathered the evidence and prepared to contact outside counsel. Before leaving, she looked at me with something that had not been present earlier. Respect, perhaps, or concern. Do not discuss this outside your household until we understand the records, she said. Your mother should not become leverage. The word stayed with me. Leverage. In my world, people were tenants, patients, mothers, and neighbors. In that building, everyone became a position on a board. Adrian walked toward the windows. From 72 floors above Manhattan, cars became beads of light. People disappeared entirely. Is that how it happens? I asked. Is what how it happens? You stand high enough, and everyone below starts looking like a number? He turned. You believe you understand me because you have spent less than an hour inside my boardroom. Your company decided my home was empty while my mother was still sleeping inside it. I did not approve those notices. Your name is on the building. My name appears on thousands of decisions I never personally review. Then perhaps the problem is not that you missed this decision. Perhaps the problem is that you built something too large to feel what it does. I expected him to order me out. Instead, he crossed to a locked cabinet and removed a framed photograph. 4 men stood before a half-built tower. One was Adrian's grandfather, Richard Cole. Beside him stood my father. Daniel Carter was smiling with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, one hand resting on a set of blueprints. My breath left me. Where did you get this? It has been in my grandfather's private collection since before I took control of the company. I lifted the frame. My father's face was sunlit, confident, alive. Illness had reduced my final memories to medicine bottles, quiet apologies, and afternoons when he stared through our apartment window, as though waiting for someone who never came. He told me he had helped build something important, I said. My mother believed he meant the first tower. He meant the company. Adrian opened a leather file and showed me the original Meridian Square partnership agreement. 3 names appeared on the first page. Richard Cole, Samuel Mercer, Daniel Carter. My father was not an employee. He was a founding partner. That cannot be real, I said. We struggled to pay rent after he became ill. The agreement granted him a 12% founding interest and the contractual right to designate one member of the board. 12% of what? At the time, almost nothing. Today, potentially 12% of Cole Meridian. The room tilted. My mother had divided medication doses to make a prescription last until payday. I had answered calls from families facing eviction while my father may have died controlling part of the company responsible for ours. Why did he never tell us? I do not know. Why was his name removed? I do not know that either. You continue saying that. Because I will not lie merely to make you feel safer. The answer stopped me. Most powerful people filled uncertainty with promises. Adrian allowed uncertainty to remain. He turned the photograph over. Faded blue handwriting covered the back. For Daniel, his share of everything built from this ground. My grandfather wrote that, Adrian said. Someone made certain neither family honored it. We spent the next hour in a private archive 2 floors below the boardroom. Adrian removed his jacket and searched the boxes himself. He handled every record bearing my father's name with unexpected care. We found tax filings, engineering reports, and letters between Daniel and Richard. The early letters were warm. They called each other brothers. The later letters became formal, then stopped 3 months before my father's fatal construction accident. One opened envelope contained no letter. Only a deposit receipt showing $500,000 transferred from Mercer Development into an account bearing my father's name. Mercer Development had been Cole Meridian's largest competitor. He would not have sold them information, I said. Adrian did not answer. That frightened me more than disagreement. My telephone vibrated. 3 missed calls from my mother. A message from the building manager said surveyors were expected the following morning despite Adrian's suspension. I need to go home. Adrian reached for his telephone. A driver will take you. I can use the subway. Victor knows your identity. So does half the lobby. This is different. He looked at the document before he looked at your face. Adrian lowered his voice. Stay somewhere else tonight. I have an apartment near the hospital district. It has a private entrance and security downstairs. No, this is not a negotiation. That sentence may work inside this building. It does not work on me. His expression hardened. You are refusing protection because you dislike the person offering it. I am refusing control disguised as protection. Safety that requires obedience is another kind of cage. Adrian went still. For the first time, he appeared to have no answer. Rachel entered carrying a laptop and a sealed evidence drive. Her face was pale. We found archived hotel surveillance from the week before Daniel Carter's accident. The screen showed my father entering a conference room with a Mercer executive. 20 minutes later, he emerged carrying a thick envelope. A second angle showed him checking the money before placing it inside his coat. Rachel opened an audio file. Through the static, my father said that Richard would never discover what he had done. There is more, Rachel said. In the preserved portion of the recording, Daniel appears to agree to betray Richard Cole. I listened twice. The first time, I heard fragments. Money. Documents. Richard will never know. The second time, every word sounded clearer because I already knew what I was expected to believe. My father had entered the hotel with nothing and left carrying $500,000. 3 months later, his partnership disappeared from the records. Soon afterward, he died. Turn it off, I said. Rachel closed the file. Adrian did not defend my father. He did not accuse him. That should have felt fair. It felt cruel. You believed it quickly, I told him. I believe evidence until stronger evidence replaces it. That must make life simple. It does not. I pressed the framed photograph against his chest. He caught it. Keep your history. My family survived without it. Emma, do not. His voice followed me into the elevator, but he did not step inside. The doors closed on his face, and I hated that some part of me had expected him to stop them. By the time I reached the lobby, the rain had weakened to a gray mist. I walked 3 blocks before realizing I was moving in the wrong direction. My mother called. There are surveyors downstairs, she said. The property manager says the company is advancing the voluntary surrender deadline to tomorrow evening. Anyone who refuses will lose the relocation payment and face immediate court action. I stopped beneath a pharmacy awning. Adrian suspended the project. They showed Mr. Boone a company notice and a copy of the existing permit. Do not sign anything. I am coming home. I called Adrian. His assistant said all project communications had been redirected under an emergency board review. 10 minutes later, Cole Meridian issued a public statement. It said the company had found no verified basis to challenge its ownership and would continue the redevelopment process. Adrian's electronic signature appeared beneath the statement. I read it twice, searching for language that meant the opposite of what it said. There was none. By the time I reached Carter House, Boxes lined the hallway. Mrs. Alvarez was wrapping photographs in bath towels. The Wilson children sat beside plastic storage bins, quiet in a way children should never have to be. My mother stood inside our apartment, holding one of her blue dishes. "I thought we had 10 days, she said. So did I. We packed until after midnight. Every object became a decision. Keep, donate, leave. My father's tool chest remained beneath the bedroom window, unopened for years because it was too heavy for my mother and too painful for me. I pulled it into the light. The lock had rusted. I used a screwdriver to lift the latch. Inside were measuring tapes, carpenter pencils, folded blueprints, and yellowed envelopes. Beneath them lay a cassette recorder, a red ledger, and a notarized document wrapped in waxed paper. The ledger contained 47 family names. Some belonged to the original residents. Others belonged to children and grandchildren who had lawfully succeeded them in the rent-stabilized apartments. Beside every name was an amount, a date, and one word. Protected. The notarized document was titled Carter Founders Trust. It placed Daniel's 12% interest into a trust benefiting his family and the 47 worker households associated with Carter House. It also named me as successor trustee after my 25th birthday and preserved the trust's right to appoint one company director. I read the sentence 3 times before understanding it. At the back of the ledger, I found a letter addressed to Richard Cole. "Richard, Mercer believes I am selling the tenant records. Let him believe it. The money is not payment for betrayal. I am using it to purchase the workers' debt and protect their homes through the Founders Trust before the bank can seize them. Do not contact me until the transfer is recorded. Someone inside the company is monitoring both of us." My vision blurred. The cassette recorder still contained a tape. Static filled the room. Then my father's voice emerged, warmer and clearer than the edited file Rachel had played. The conversation continued beyond the preserved ending. The Mercer executive asked whether Richard suspected anything. My father answered, "He believes I betrayed him. That is the only way to keep him away until the trust is recorded." The company recording had not been damaged. It had been deliberately shortened. Someone preserved the accusation and removed the explanation. My telephone illuminated with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Surveyors arrive at 8. Victor will offer immediate payments in exchange for signed surrender forms. Do not accept them." I looked at the trust certificate, the ledger, and the recorder. They were not trying to remove us before an appeal. They were trying to collect waivers before anyone discovered that we were not merely tenants. We were beneficiaries. "We are not leaving tonight," I told my mother. She looked toward the boxes. "What are we going to do?" I picked up the ledger. "We are going to tell every household in this building that Cole Meridian did not create 47 unwanted tenants. Daniel created 47 protected owners." By 7 the following morning, every door in Carter House was open. People stood in the hallway holding coffee, identification papers, old leases, and the kind of fear that turns neighbors into witnesses. I placed the red ledger and trust certificate on a folding table beneath the broken lobby light. I read each family name aloud. Mrs. Alvarez pressed one hand against her chest. Mr. Boone removed his glasses and cleaned them even though they were not dirty. No one celebrated. Ownership sounded powerful inside a boardroom. In our lobby, it sounded impossible. "This does not make the building safe yet," I told them. "It gives us evidence that the original ownership interest was placed in a trust for these households and their legal successors." "Will it stop the surveyors?" Mrs. Wilson asked. "Not by itself. We need legal verification, and every beneficiary must confirm that I may act as trustee while the claim is reviewed." At 7:30, I called every housing attorney I knew through the legal aid clinic. 2 were in court. One had a conflict involving Cole Meridian. Another said the case required resources her office did not possess. At 7:48, Rachel called. "Where are you?" "Carter House. Do not allow anyone to sign a surrender agreement." I already told them. Victor and several directors invoked an emergency governance clause last night. They temporarily restricted Adrian's communication authority and released the statement using a previously authorized signature block. Why did nobody tell me? The internal communication system was monitored. I sent the warning message from a secure number. The unresolved fear inside me settled into anger. At least it finally had a name. Victor scheduled a board meeting for 10, Rachel continued. He wants Adrian removed before outside counsel completes the records review. Why should I care what happens to Adrian? Because he refused to withdraw the fraud investigation, even after the board threatened his position. The residents need an attorney. I resigned from Cole Meridian at 7 this morning. I can represent the trust petition, but the company will challenge me. Bring the original documents. At 8, 3 city building inspectors entered the lobby to examine the property. Victor's property manager followed them carrying envelopes. He announced that each household would receive $2,000 for signing an immediate voluntary surrender agreement. $2,000. Enough to sound generous to someone afraid of having nowhere to sleep. Not enough to replace a life. No one is signing, I said. The residents may decide for themselves, the manager replied. Then explained that the agreement also waives every ownership claim connected to the property. The inspectors stopped writing. The manager's eyes moved toward the ledger. That is private company property. It was stored in my father's home. Then it was improperly retained. You mean hidden from the people named inside it? He reached toward the table. Mr. Boone placed one hand beside the ledger before the manager could touch it. He did not threaten anyone. He simply stood there. Mrs. Alvarez joined him. Then the Wilson family. One by one, the residents formed a quiet line around the documents. The manager looked at people who had spent years being treated as paperwork. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Rachel arrived at 8:30 with a mobile notary and 2 paralegals. By 9:15, the beneficiaries had signed identity declarations and acknowledgments confirming my role as successor trustee. Rachel compared the trust certificate with a dormant county filing under the same seal. The recorded index did not include the full document, but it confirmed that a Carter Founders Trust had been filed 14 years earlier. She sent certified copies to Cole Meridian's outside counsel and corporate transfer agent. Then she filed an emergency petition in New York State Supreme Court seeking to preserve the property, records, and trust rights until a full hearing. The board meeting began at 10 without us. At 11:40, the judge issued a temporary order preventing the company from altering the property, destroying records, or collecting additional surrender waivers. The order did not decide final ownership. It preserved the dispute long enough for the truth to be examined. Shortly after noon, Cole Meridian's transfer agent confirmed something more important. 12% of the company's original voting interest had never been lawfully canceled. It remained listed in a dormant account under the Carter Founders Trust. The original partnership agreement also granted that trust the right to designate one director. The board adjourned until 2 in the afternoon while outside counsel reviewed the documents. When Rachel and I returned to the 72nd floor, the champagne was gone. Adrian stood outside the boardroom. He looked as though he had not slept. His sleeves were wrinkled and his tie hung loose. The control I had seen the day before was gone, but not his focus. "Did you approve the public statement?" I asked. "No. Did you know the surrender deadline had been advanced?" "Not until after Victor invoked the emergency clause." "Why should I believe you?" Adrian looked at the trust certificate in my hands. "You should not believe me because I ask. Believe what I place at risk." Inside the boardroom, Victor presented Adrian's removal as an act of stability. He accused Adrian of reckless investigation, reputational damage, and failure to protect company assets. Adrian entered and placed a signed resignation letter on the table. "Open every record connected to the Carter Trust," he said. "Suspend Victor's financial authority pending independent investigation. Preserve Carter House. If those decisions cost me this position, accept my resignation after the records are secured." Victor smiled. "Then you leave the board no alternative." Rachel entered with Cole Meridian's outside counsel. The attorney confirmed that the transfer agent had recognized the dormant trust interest provisionally and that the founders' agreement gave the trust the right to appoint one director. Evelyn Grant, the board chair, turned toward me. "As successor trustee, whom do you designate?" My hands did not shake. "Myself." Victor stared at me. "She is a legal assistant. She is also the representative named in a controlling founders' agreement," Evelyn said. "The existing board had 8 voting directors. My appointment created a 9th. I signed the acceptance papers and took the empty chair at the table. The most powerful vote in the room now belonged to people who had never been allowed through its doors." Victor looked at the documents as though they were stains someone had left on his table. "This recognition is temporary," he said. "So is our removal deadline," I replied. "You were willing to treat that as permanent." Victor shifted his strategy. He offered a formal company buyout of the trust's interest at a premium. The amount was large enough to pay my mother's medical bills, purchase a new apartment, and erase every debt I had carried since college. For one dangerous moment, I imagined accepting it. I imagined handing my mother keys to a quiet home with an elevator and sunlight. I imagined sleeping without calculating rent. Victor saw the hesitation. The trust could walk away secure for generations, he said. All you need to do is support leadership that understands business. You mean you? I mean someone capable of protecting value. I looked at my father's ledger. Beside every family name, he had written the same word. Protected. Daniel could have chosen himself. Instead, he used the money offered to him to protect people who might never know what he sacrificed. I closed the ledger. My father did not establish this trust, so I could sell these families back to you. Evelyn called the vote on Adrian's removal. For directors voted against him. For voted to retain him. Adrian did not watch them. He watched me. I was the 9th director. The deciding vote. I vote against removing Adrian Cole, I said. Relief moved through his eyes, but I continued before he could speak. That vote is not forgiveness. It is an opportunity to prove that accepting limits is part of leadership. I introduced a second resolution. Carter House would remain residential. Every beneficiary household would receive a documented interest through the trust. Repairs would begin under independent supervision. No redevelopment involving occupied housing could proceed without a community impact review and resident representation. Victor would be suspended from financial and records authority while an outside investigation examined the altered documents, edited recording, and unauthorized statement. The Carter Founders Trust would retain its board seat. Adrian supported the resolution. Evelyn supported it. After a long silence, enough directors joined them for it to pass. Victor pushed back his chair. She cannot enter one meeting and rewrite an entire company. Evelyn looked at him. Perhaps someone should have answered her emails. Victor left under instructions to preserve all records and cooperate with outside counsel. No one declared him guilty that afternoon. That decision belonged to investigators and the courts. But he no longer controlled the documents, the money, or the people searching for the truth. When the meeting ended, Rachel went downstairs to complete the court filings. Adrian and I remained beside the long black table. The rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds and touched the windows for the first time since I had entered the building. You could have voted me out, he said. Yes. You could have accepted the buyout. Yes. Why did you keep me? I looked at the unsigned resignation letter. Because when protecting your position required burying the truth, you chose the truth. That decision nearly cost me everything. That is why it mattered. He folded the resignation letter and placed it inside his jacket. What happens when I fail one of your conditions? I vote according to what you do, not according to what you promise. A small smile reached his face. It was the first expression I had seen on him that did not appear practiced. 6 months later, my mother completed her second operation. Cole Meridian did not pay for it as a favor. Her medical expenses were covered through the beneficiary distribution she lawfully received from the Carter Founders Trust. That distinction mattered. Carter House received a new elevator, reliable heating, and a roof that no longer leaked into the third-floor hallway. Mrs. Alvarez selected the color for the lobby walls. Mr. Boone supervised the contractors even though no one had asked him. The Wilson children planted flowers beside the entrance. Outside investigators reconstructed the missing records and referred their findings to the appropriate authorities. The legal proceedings had not finished, but the documents could no longer disappear. My office was on the 72nd floor, near the boardroom rather than inside Adrian's executive suite. My name appeared on the glass in simple black letters. Emma Carter, Carter Founders Trust Director. On my first morning, Adrian left a cup of coffee on my desk. No note. No demand. Black coffee with no sugar. He had remembered. I carried it into the boardroom and took the chair that had once been offered as a way to contain me. This time, I sat because the trust had earned the right to place me there. Adrian stood beside the windows, looking down at a city he had spent years believing he understood. You changed this company, he said. No, I answered. I reminded it what it was built on. He had governed from the top floor. My father had protected the ground beneath it. I had entered carrying papers that treated our lives as obstacles. I left carrying the authority to make those lives visible. That was when I understood that real power was never the ability to make people disappear. Real power was accepting the responsibility to make certain they were finally seen.